welcome everybody. This afternoon we are very lucky to welcome really truly a panel of experts. We'll be speaking about the subject of artist estates, and we will try and make some movements from the historical perspective to contemporary estates, look at theoretical academic aspects of this, but also very much at the practical aspects of the public sector, the private sector, and what to do with artist estates in contemporary art, in the reality of the art world. I would like to start by asking all of the speakers to just briefly introduce themselves so that we understand who they are and what their connection is to the subject of artist estates. Anne de Breuck, can we begin with you, because you are the furthest on the left. Thank you. Can you use the microphone?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I am Anne de Breuck, and I'm working for the King Baudouin Foundation as a coordinator of the Heritage Department. Our core business is safeguarding significant heritage for the next generations, valorize them, make them available. We are also facilitating philanthropy. So, and this is the context within we are be contacted by contemporary artists because they want to preserve, to make their oeuvre available for the next generations, and they consider donating to give form to their project.
Thank you, Anne. Hélène.
Hello, I'm Helen Vandenberg. I'm the daughter of the artist Philippe Vandenberg, who died 7 years ago. And together with my two brothers, we are managing the estate, Philippe Vandenberg, here in Belgium. And we are focusing on three important tasks in the estate. It's conservation of the studio and the works, facilitating research, and to bring the work out of the studio, so to do shows and books. We are now working 7 years for the estate, and we have a group of 8 people working, and we have 8 to 10 big projects a year. So,
thanks. My name is Philippine Hogan. I'm an artist. I live here in Brussels. I work in performance and also have some experience with taking care of another artist's work. Anne.
Hello, my name is Adriaens-Pannier. I used to work as a curator in the Museum of Fine Art in Brussels, but now I'm pensioned. And I have different little hats. The hat I will put on for this afternoon will be the hat of as the president of the Peire Stichting, who is a Belgian artist, who died in 1994. And together with his wife, they wrote a will telling exactly what they wanted to do for a foundation, because they were childless. And I can then historically explain how we already have been working for more than 21 years, so we are a mid-career estate, I should say.
Thank you, Anne. Yoeri.
Good afternoon, my name is Yoeri-Vanlangendonck, and I started the Callewaert-Vanlangendonck gallery with my colleague Breuck Callewaert in 2012, and we're specialized in mainly Belgian abstract artists from the 50s and 60s. And in 2014, Guy Vandenberghe, who is an important Belgian abstract artist from the 50s and 60s, he left us his archives, and we already published 2 books on his archive and his oeuvre, and when he died, we bought a significant part of his oeuvre, and we are also working with a historian on his archives and now making exhibitions in Belgium and also abroad in Germany.
Super. Thank you all very much. I'd like to start with you, Anne, if you don't mind. You said you were only wearing your hat as president of the Jenny and Luc Peire Foundation, but I'm going to bother you with your other hat, one of your other hats, which is you are an expert on also on Léon Spiliart. And just because I'm curious, I'd like to start our conversation in a little bit of a historical context. I'm curious whether the work that he left behind, is there an estate? And if so, can you maybe give us an idea of what's the position of such an estate, if it is that took in the time that when he died, and how that, and so that we can sort of compare and see what the changes are in regards to how we regard and deal with estates in the contemporary, in the now.
Well, it's an easy answer in a certain way. Léonce Pélliard died in 1946, which means 70 years last year.
Yeah.
And there is no estate because his daughter died in 2005 and she had 3 children who are still alive. They are in their 70s. They have children and their children have already children, which means the more than 300 works that were left over when Madeleine Pélliard died are now divided between the 3 children and the grandchildren. So for me, it starts really as an expert on the work and the writer of the catalogue raisonné. I have to deal with a lot of generations, a lot of people, some younger, some less, it depends. But so there is no real estate there, and most probably there will never be an estate. So that's different with Luc Peire.
Does that mean that an estate means that the body of work has to be somehow comprehensible, somehow gathered?
Yes, and that's exactly what happened with the Luc Peire Stichting. Artists who die with no children, I mean, this is of course the reason why they think more than others about the future. So if I can historically a little bit trace the Luc Peire Foundation, who is located physically in Knokke. Luc Peire was born in Brugge in 1916 and he died in Paris in 1994. The reason why the Luc Peire Stichting is in Knokke, although the artist is the choice of the artist and his wife, although both of them were living half in the year in Paris, where they had an apartment and also a studio, an engraving studio. But in the summertime they came to Knokke. He was originally from Bruges and he loved the seaside, so July, August they spent at the seaside. And originally in the 1940s he could work as a young artist in a house that belonged to the family of his wife Jenny. And there they worked for 2 or 3 years. Then when the house was sold, because the parents of Jenny died, the house was sold. And then he had friends who helped him building at the back of the garden, who built him a studio. In 1946, around 1947 it was finished. And there he worked only in the summertime. Next doors, in 1964, he bought a piece of land from his neighbor, and there had planned to erect a bungalow in the sense that he was living in the atelier in the summer that was not very comfortable, and the bungalow had been built according to the plans he had. And it was really made possible by the Kunstwerkhuizen de Koene in Kortrijk. So it's exactly response to the work of art of Luc Peire, which means very rectilinear, very simple, very white. And then now the foundation is even larger than what it used to be, because what happened when in 1993 and 1994, respectively, first Jenny and then Luc Peire died, they had both already outlined very strictly the will in which there was a foundation that was incorporated, and all the articles of the association, that's what it called in English, we call it statuten, les statuts, were really well written down in different pages. And what was the estate at that moment? Because the foundation became a certain estate. There were more than 200 works of art, which are not only oil on canvases, but also drawings, graphie. If you want to know more about graphie, I'm willing to explain it to you. It looks more like this. It's a black and white work. This is like the kind of graphie. Also engravings and silk screens. So more than 200 works. A substantial sum of money, quite substantial, I have to say. Although we were very astonished because they lived very, very with a scarce, small budget. We all laughed when we discovered the amount of money that came with the estate, with the foundation. And who did he want to have in the foundation? Well, Luc Peire designed, choose between his friends, and very carefully chosen.
Interesting.
Yeah, the very first person was a notary, of course, a lawyer, of course, museum directors, too. Another museum curator, myself, when I was very young at that moment, Also his nephew, which is interesting because he did die. They died without children, but he had a brother, and the brothers had different children. And Marc Peire, who is the nephew, had been already appointed in a certain way, the archives, the man who was in charge of the archives, and started slowly as an art historian to already put quite a lot of information together. But as well, Jenny as Luc kept every paper, every catalogue, every listing, and so on. Then there was another young lady, now we are all a bit older now, that was as in 96, and she had already made an inventory, a first inventory of Luc Peire's work, on which we have worked later on for then to make the catalogue raisonné, but this is like another story.
Yeah.
And what he wanted was of course to promote that we would promote his work of art through exhibitions, through all different kind of things. So this came in 1996. In between, in 2003 and 2003, we had a chance to buy the former house, which was on the street level, where they had lived for a while in the 1940s. We bought the building, we tore it torn down, oui, and we rebuilt quite a new building. Two young architects did that, Inge de Breuck and Peter de Breuck. And you see, it looks very familiar in a certain way with white and black, exactly the rectilinear structure of the work of Luc Peire. What do we have in this building? A reception area in the beginning, quite a nice space for an exhibition, not large, but one big room. But the most important thing is we have a museal safe built on the first floor, in which we keep all the works, museum standards, with air conditioning and everything that you want.
Okay.
You understand that the money was going a bit down. Anyway, in the will, it was stated that we could, if we had to, that we could eventually sell works of art, which we haven't done until once or twice, when someone with, like a collector, very specific collector in this kind of work, and who perhaps already had been buying works, Luc Peire, when he was alive, there we then, especially from we have 3 stars, a selection of 3 stars, and we let the people choose, and then they can eventually have a work.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to come to back to that subject in a little moment. So, but basically, what you're sketching is a huge difference between the Adriaens-Pannier situation and the Luc Peire, and especially because Luc Peire, everything was foreseen. Not only did he stipulate what should happen to the work, etc., but also even who should be involved in these questions, etc. So maybe we can say that there's a big evolution to be seen there with how the much older, the pre-war, let's say, generation dealt with or thought about the idea of their own work, how to leave it, and post-war to now, which takes me to you, Anne de Breuck, because you were talking about this interesting phenomenon that artists, living artists now, are approaching you as the King Baudouin Foundation sometimes to ask your advice, if I understood correctly, about what steps they can take now to safeguard their oeuvre, that it doesn't become dispersed. But also they are interested in donating parts of their oeuvre, but you are not an exhibiting organization, etc., neither an academic or archiving. So what are your considerations when somebody approaches you?
Well, they are approaching us because we are active in the heritage sector. And once their oeuvre can be heritage, so they want to leave something for the next generations, and we are one of the associations who can help them. But our problem is indeed that we are a private foundation, but with public benefits. So our aim must be to serve the public sector. So if we accept a donation, we have to look after partners, to valorize them, to make them available, to make them live the oeuvre. So it's not not so easy for us to find such partners for contemporary artists. So that's one of the most important things and the most difficult things. We have to be very careful too, because our actions are highly observed, and so if we are supporting a contemporary artist, well, it can have an impact
on their career now, or
on
the
their
work,
career,
the
on their
value
market
of the
value,
work.
and so on. So that's not our aim. We can't support in a private way. We have to look after public benefits.
Yes, very interesting. And perhaps we can discuss amongst ourselves a bit later to think a bit more about this idea of the conundrum that you're in. Perhaps we can find good advices from the other speakers. For example, Yoeri, who is in also a very interesting situation. You run a gallery.
Yes,
in your gallery, you have both living and dead artists, but you were also, the gallery, Guy van den Branden, also left his
archive suite, yes.
complete archive with you. Also some work, or just the archive?
No, actually, he left us he entrusted us his archives, and after his death we bought, and also while he was still living, we bought a significant part of his oeuvre, which allows us to even promote him more, because we have key works that we are lending to museums, that we are showing, not selling actually, but that works that are contributing to promoting the artist, his oeuvre, and also we're working on his archives in discovering the networks he had. So how he had contacts with international artists, but also national artists, and how they came together and exhibited. And we're trying to discover and to share with the public how the post-war abstract artists were very international and also underrated for the moment. And we're doing that through publishing books and also engaging in collaborations with also auction houses like Dorotheen, but not in a commercial sense of selling the works at auction, but using their network to show the works, as for instance in Dorotheen, Brussels, Düsseldorf. So we're using the network to show those Belgian avant-gardists.
And why are you reticent to sell? I mean, you are a gallery.
We have a historic approach, so we bought a significant part, but we want those works to be in good collections, and we want to bring them to a higher level, so that people can appreciate the work more and see how important the artist was.
Yeah, so it's a strategic, academic, artistic, and a strategic choice to be very specific in where the work is placed and how the work is placed.
We don't just want to be a commercial gallery. We want to add something to the art history as well.
I see. That's very interesting. And how do you, just as a question in between, how does that work for you? This combination of dealing with both dead and living artists. Is it for you a completely different activity of?
No, I think it's very interesting that dead and living artists go into dialogue with each other, because dead artists become alive again when contemporary artists. We are planning an exhibition with Timothy Segers, who is a contemporary artist, and he's selecting works from Vandenberghe's oeuvre. And by doing that, we get a new insight on his work, and by doing that, Vandenberghe's oeuvre becomes contemporary again.
Yes, and this, of course, brings me to you, Hélène, because this is exactly what is also one of your important activities in the running or keeping alive the work of your father.
Yeah. Yes, when my father died 7 years ago, he didn't left a will. So we were stuck with this thousands of works in the studio. So the first thing we did with my brothers was we talked a lot. We really talked a lot. What can we do? What do we want to do? What would our father have wanted? And we also talked with other people, like what can we do, but we also talked a lot about the quality of the work, because it's very important. I'm also an advisor for estates, and I always advise this to other estates. It's very important that you know where you stand with the work, because as a child, of course, it's the best work of the world. So, and you have really to know where you stand before defining a goal, where you can go. So we invited a lot of people, also international curators who never knew my father. So after 1 year, we were able to define a goal, and that was really to keep the work of my father alive on international level. But how do you do that? How do you keep a work alive of that artist? So we decided to work on research. So as Yoeri also said, I think research is very important because it's the stones, the stones where you can build a house on. So we work a lot with universities. There's a lot of young researchers who work on the work, people who never knew my father. For example, one of the things is every year we organize a seminar in the studio where we invite international researchers for 3 days in the studio, and they look at the work. We just have 12 works around, and for 3 days they talk about the work and they look at the work, and it's super because for them it's very interesting. They never can do it anymore. They're never paid for looking at the work without that there's anything that they have to do. There's no show or book that they have to make. It's just look at the work and talk about the work. And it's so interesting because depending on their context, they will read the work completely different, even differently than my father would have seen his work. So that's one thing that we do. And a second thing is also, how do you keep it alive? It's through other artists. And as my father was a real artist, other artists always has been the best ambassadors for the work because they don't have anything to gain. They like the work or they don't like the work. So we started, I think, 8 years ago. It was the first time that we did a project was because as I'm an art historian, they asked me, do you want to create a show of your father? And I said, no, I don't want to do that because, and I still think it's not healthy. I'm much too close to the work. So I asked a good friend of mine, Berlinde de Breuck, if she wanted to create a show. So she came to the studio, and for 2 years, she worked in the studio, and she made 2 shows, one in La Maison Rouge in Paris, and one in the Pont in Tilburg. And she made a book. After her, we worked with Walter Swenne, with Dirk Braakman, with Harald Jos de Gruyter, Thijs de Gruyter. We had a beautiful show in Seoul last year with Koen van den Broek. He selected the work. And now we're having a show with Bruce Nauman and my father. And it's incredibly interesting. It's as you said, depending on their practice, they see new things in the work, and other people discover also new things. So we always have new readings on the work.
Yeah. So this also maybe says something about how work is always in a process of being reinvented or reinventing itself somehow through the lens of the contemporary.
Yes, I really think that the work lives in dialogue with the world. Yeah. So a work is dead if it doesn't dialogue with the world, if you just hang it in somewhere where nobody can see it. And it's so important to keep this dialogue ongoing. But as an estate, and that's something that I advise also, it's very important not to stand between the world and the work. Yeah. So to let the people have their own readings. And sometimes it's very difficult because I have my reading. I was learned by the reading that my father gave us, but it's not always the reading that it's now relevant. And that's so important, to be aware of this.
Yeah. And then there's also there's the reading through looking at the work, through letting other people look at the work, the eyes of the other. But we were also discussing before the reading through the archive. Yoeri, you said something quite interesting about that. Do you remember what you said or no?
I don't recall it.
You were saying that it's one of the important activities of the gallery, especially in relation to Guy van den Brande, is to use the archive to reinterpret, re-understand.
Absolutely, and also to see the connections between artists and how they try to promote themselves, and it's a totally different view how we look now as on art history of or on the artist, then how it happened. If you read correspondence between artists, you can actually through the archive we get a glimpse of behind the scenes of the avant-garde, how things became art history, and it's very important to discover that, to publish books about it, and to show the network they were building up, and nationally and internationally as well.
So if we come back to the conundrum of Anne de Breuck, what to do with these oeuvres that are donated to the foundation without you being an exhibition space, etc. Would I be right in saying that maybe this is an approach you could think about, that to invite artists to not only donate the work but also archival material, so that in fact that which you're given, with that which you're left with, is something that actually you can start working with from the archive, academically or art historically, trying to re-understand the work. And also another advice seems to be involving other artists somehow to dialogue with the work, to interact with the work. Is that something that could work in your organization at all?
Yes, of course, because if we have to find a partner to make the oeuvre live and to showcase it, but if we have the information, the thoughts of the artist, the context, the historical context, the artistical context, it's easier to start. Yeah. And we have information that's from the first source, from the artist himself. So I think it's really important, and it will be important too for our partners. But it's not enough. We really need to have the partners who want to make them available, and we are thinking for a long time, not only for 10, 20 years, but if we accept a donation, we accept it for the eternity.
That's right. It's a
Nobody
never-ending story.
That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
We want to give or to how do I say that? To give the artist or the person who donate to make sure that what he wants will be reality,
or she.
And we will try to do it as long as possible.
Yeah.
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 Can I
come back to you in a second?
just on this word, what he wants? It's something very tricky, because, as I said, my father, he didn't left us a will, and actually I'm happy he didn't do it, because now my father has such a big international career. We're with Haster and Word, we're in London, we're in New York, we're in Los Angeles. And I think my father, if he would have written a will, maybe he would have said, I want everything to be donated to the SMAC, for example. And then his career would have been finished, you know? So it's very tricky, what I said already 2 days ago, that the artist creates, but it doesn't mean that he's the best
advisor.
The best communicator or the best ambassador for his own work.
Yeah.
And that's something that I always, you have to keep it in mind also.
Yeah. Yes, is this something that is sometimes difficult in your situation, Anne, because Luc apparently, or Luc and Jenny, maybe both of them, left such extremely detailed stipulations about what to do, how to do it, etc. Do you sometimes feel that your hands are tied somehow?
Well, I think the will was written very clearly, but he also anticipated, Luc and Jenny both anticipated towards the future. So what we did in the beginning is, of course, the relationship that Luc Peire had with other artists who were close to him. These we invited over, and we have every year a summer exhibition. So we have exhibited quite of his own contemporaries, which now are which is now modern art, not contemporary anymore. But we now, after 20 years, feel free to go a little bit forwards. And we have also younger artists who relate to the idea of construction, to relate, it's still in relation with the spirit of the art. I mean, we cannot really ask, I don't know, Luc Tuymans, for example, to come over, if he would be interested, which I would doubt, but still it doesn't matter. So it is free. In the beginning also, Luc Peire asked us to go and approach the museums which had given him in former times exhibitions to find out if they were interested, especially in having work, because we are looking to the future. After 21 years, it is difficult. In our board of directors now, we are only 2 of the so many who have known him. I mean, the board of directors becomes younger people, and they have never known the artist, so they don't really understand 100% why we were rigid. Now we open up, but which means also what for the future, because we had a substantial amount of money, but we both land. We build a house. We build also a second house, a garden room for the environment, which is like the final work of art that Luc Peire made. And you have a picture of that here. It's a room in which you step, but it's large, it's 7 on 7. So we build a garden room for that. It belongs to the Flemish community, but we show it, and so the people come on. And the idea behind this afterwards, what are we going to do? I mean, because we now have financially, the banks are doing very bad with our money. That's a problem. And what will we do? Well, normally we have still 5 years of working money. That's always left over. So we do have to approach the city in Knokke, but they are not really interested, and that's a long story. Or can we just approach another museum who wants to have it as a satellite museum? So it is very difficult. We don't own the work. The difference with Yoeri is that they own the work. I mean, we don't own the work. We are just the go-between from 1996 up to the future. So we have a problem that we have to find a solution for.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem with the estate, not with a family, because a family can just decide, okay, we stop it and we sell the whole thing.
And that's a problem that a lot of mono museums have.
Monographic.
Yeah, you have in the south of France. How many do you have? There's so many. Even Matisse, the Picasso, it works well because it's a great place to look, but the people go there to see the place. And that's why I don't believe also in this monographic museums. I don't think it's such a pity, but for example, if you see the museum of Roger Ravel, now Roger Ravel he is a good artist, but now it's a local artist. And that's what, with our estate, with my brothers, we really decided these works has to go out of the studio. At this moment, we still have works in the studio because we have a lot of visitors. We work with the work, but at the end, it's important that these works are going out in the world.
Yeah.
And
rather than having it sort of living somewhere, giving it a home in a particular space.
It becomes a mausoleum.
I see, yes.
And it's a pity,
because
the artist didn't make this work to be in a mausoleum. Of course.
I have a question for you again, Yoeri, in relation to this. We're talking about basically what are the best circumstances for the work to live on, to be dynamic after the past artist's passing. What do you advise your living artists how to prepare their work for estatehood? Is this something you discuss with your artists? Do you advise them?
Well, the contemporary artists we are bringing are still quite young, so it's not a
still,
topic.
But still.
But I think it's very important to know if you have family, I think you should actually organize it like Hélène is doing with her brothers, to leave your heirs free, so that you don't lock away your work into a foundation or a museum, but to make your heirs able to work with it, to place it internationally, and indeed it should go to important collections, to museums, but it should live and it should not be in a in an estate.
Yeah, we've heard some different views on that.
An estate should pass on to something.
Yeah,
else,
because we've also heard of people whose brothers, sisters, or children had no affinity with art, also don't know anything about it. And the artist, I even spoke to an artist who was consciously trying to arrange for the work not to become a family affair after his passing.
Actually, it's the same with the family of Vandenberghe, who are also not very interested in art history, but we guide them.
I see.
That's our task.
Yeah.
But I think indeed that it's very important to advise the artist or the heirs who perhaps have no affinity or less affinity to give the instruction to make the work of the oeuvre live and to permit dialogue with others, permit to showcase them outside. I think this is the most important advice, to be very open in the wills and not say, I want that my work is make part of one modern art museum, because nobody knows what will happen with that museum after 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if the will of the artist or the person who is creating the structure, who will make live the oeuvre, is open enough, you can go. You can ask the people who are the best placed to do so, to make it live. And if after a time you have other people who are best placed to do that, and you can change the people, you can change the partners which we are working with, and it's very important to be open.
Yeah, so advice to all artists, don't leave your stuff to one museum.
Well, it can, but you don't. You have to know that this museum is not able to promote it forever. You just have to know that, because I know a lot of artists now, or heirs, they go to the museum and they want to donate the estate, and I understand them, but because they want a good place, but you have to be aware that the museum has to promote different artists. They cannot promote. But that's also history. History will anyway define if a work is relevant or not. So I think it's true what you say. You have to be open also, and you cannot define everything, because at the end it will be, even we can do a lot, but at the end it will be the history who will define if the work is strong enough to stay or not.
Some people who were here Friday heard this already, maybe, but I just have to mention it. Andrew Renton brought in that referred to the will that Kafka left behind for his best friend. You know this, he left a will to his best friend Max, and the will said, "Burn it all."
And he didn't.
And he didn't. So this brings on the interesting subject of the ethics, of the interpretation of the will. And how much freedom you as an heir, on the one hand, you as an heir feel that you have to interpret the will, and also on the other side, me as an artist, I'm thinking also a lot about, I could imagine leaving a will saying burn it all, not only to be done with to not burden somebody else with it, but as an artistic position. So in fact, this whole thinking about what an estate does, what a legacy can be, is also very much part of your artistic position as an artist and your artistic process even.
Yeah, and it's something that you're confronted a lot as an estate. For example, we have work, and my father made works in blood. So this blood is going to disappear. I already have collectors who call me, yes, you know, Hélène, this work is disappearing. Yeah. So what do? My father knew that the work would disappear, so it's in the concept of the work. But of course, the people want to have it, that they don't disappear. So it's very difficult. What do you do as an estate? Do you fix it? Or far are you not going to fix it? And this is just one question. There's so many times that we have this question. How far do you go in honoring the concept or the philosophy of an artist after he's dead?
Or her death.
Or her death, completely.
We're talking about men all the time, so I just have to bring in this point.
It is indeed very interesting because we have a bit the same problem at the Luc Peire Stichting. I mean, Luc Peire normally kept the work he thought was relevant for writing his own art history.
Yeah.
But there are places where we have find out that some periods have never been documented. So we do buy art, we do buy other works by Luc Peire, which didn't belong in the beginning. We were not obliged to keep it as it was, so we can let work go, but we also are buying work. And we one day had a very funny story, a very short story, is that there was a collector who came and who wrote us a letter, and he said, listen, I want to have a real Peire. And we were a little bit astonished. I said, but you have one. Yes, but you know, it's from the figurative period. And I want to have stripes. So, of course, we exchanged. And we were very happy because we let the work go. He was happy. He had a real Luc Peire. And we figured out a work that we had from the the Moroccan period, which we had nothing at all. So we also bought a self-portrait, which was not belonging to the collection. So we do have the collection lives, and this is fine. Although the will is restricted, in a certain way, it's still open-ended. And Luc Peire himself knew quite well that there was no way that we could go on forever. So he left also this open. We want to give everything away. I mean, to whom wants to take care of it, we want to give it away, but we don't want to burden. And as a former museum curator, I know what a burden it is to have to take care of every single works that come into a patrimonium.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Did Anne de Breuck, have we helped you a little bit with your conundrum of the what to do with the offered estates? Or do you have some more questions? Well, now we have these experts in front of us.
We started a very deep reflection about it. It's really the start, because the results of what we did is not significant. So we have to continue to reflect about it. But I think we want to help contemporary artists, because they are witnesses of their period, of the time where we're living in. So I think it's important we do something for them, but we can't take engagements that we will not
be able to fulfill,
to
sustain
on a long time. So this is important. So I think we will ask to the contemporary artists to be very open to perhaps doing things when we can do it, but if it's not possible, if the history decides in another way, perhaps we will have to buy or to give to other people and not to museums. I don't know. Yeah. I think contemporary artists have to be very open to accept we cannot safeguard everything.
Yeah.
Some very significant works in their oeuvre that they can choose by themselves. Mm-hmm. So these are two items we are thinking about at the moment. But it's really the start of a deep reflection.
Yeah.
I am part of this commission, and it's very difficult to figure out which artists, who are we to decide what is really going to be good and which is going to be historically significant. And so also, if the body is large, we have to ask the artist to restrict, and he will find out, and he will choose. Perhaps we would have chosen something else, and that's part of the reflection, which is very difficult. Very well-known artists have been thinking about that already before, and many times the artists that come to us are a bit hopeless for them, but it's hopeless for us also, because can we just refuse? Can we just, we think it's not exactly what the patrimonial should be, which is easier for us to deal with when someone wants to sell us something. that's easier to deal, because then we say we have standards, we are very high, and we can compare. But how can you compare a work of one artist with the work of another artist?
And also in the moment, so something that may seem very obscure or unimportant now might, in a different moment in time, suddenly be important to re-evaluate our idea of our own history and our art history. So this is also a very complicating factor, I imagine. Just before we continue, are there any questions from the audience at this moment? No. So I think we have just a few minutes left. Hélène, are there some other things you'd like to share with the audience or this panel regarding the practical work that you do in this very dedicated life you lead, dedicated activity of taking care of the estate?
Well, something that I advise to children, to heirs, who come to me in panic. What do I have to do with all this? I always say, you know, you can just start to find an environment where the works are safe. So that's already a very big thing. Just try to find a way, a place where the works are safe, and try to make an inventory, you know, to number everything. And already this is a lot. Because a lot of people say, yes, but you're an art historian and you work full time for it, but I don't have the time, I don't have the money to do it. And I think already doing only this, that the works are safe and that you have an inventory of all the works, that's already a big thing.
Yeah.
And then, step by step, sometimes somebody else will discover it. Maybe it can take 10, 20 years, but the works are safe and there's an inventory. That's already the basic I always advise to the heirs.
Yeah, very good advice. Okay, thank you so much, Anne de Breuck. Thank you so much, Hélène Vandenberg. Thank you so much, Adriaens-Pannier. And thank you, Yoeri Vanlangendonck.
You're welcome.
Thanks to the public.